Hello, this is an example for you of the food chains assessment. Show me what you know. My food chain has phytoplankton, krill, and a whale. Question 1, which organism is the producer? Producers are always found at the start of the food chain. Which organism is the secondary consumer? So the krill is the primary consumer, the whale is the secondary consumer. What process is the plant using to make its biomass? Photosynthesis. Which organism would have the most biomass? So if we took the total mass of all of the organisms eaten at each level, the phytoplankton would have the biggest. What would happen to the number of krill if the secondary consumers were wiped out? So if the whales were wiped out, little mistake there. If the whales were wiped out, what would happen to the number of krill? Well, they would increase. So the next question, what habitat would we find this in? Well, this would be an ocean habitat. All of these animals live in the ocean. Which organism would have the largest population? That would be the first step of the food chain. It's got the most biomass. They're tiny creatures, so the phytoplankton would have the biggest population. 3 abiotic factors that would affect this food chain, particular in the ocean. So if we're thinking about non-living factors, moisture wouldn't really be an issue because they're in the water, but if we consider what would affect all of them, temperature would be one. The amount of oxygen in the water and light levels would affect the photosynthesis, which would then affect everything else. Biotic factors, living factors. So we might have the introduction of a new predator, which could take away numbers at one level of the thing. We might have a disease that wipes out one section, so a pathogen that could do that. The next question was about competition. So the plants would be competing for light to do photosynthesis, but the other things wouldn't. Things that they would all compete for would be food. They would all compete for, well, not necessarily food, actually, because the photosynthesis, space, water, two things there. Okay. The next question was about one consumer in the food chain. I've chosen the whale to be my consumer, and I would like you to name a structural, a behavioral, and a functional adaptation. So thinking about the structure of the whale's body here, we've got the thick layer of blubber that we mentioned earlier in the week. You may mention their special teeth. This is a baleen whale, so it filters out the krill while it's eating. It's streamlined shape. Okay, that's structural. If we think about behavioral, I don't know if you know this about whales, but they actually migrate in the winter to give birth in warmer waters. So this is a behavior that they do to help their survival. And finally, a functional adaptation. When these whales dive, their bodies slow down their heart rate so that blood can be diverted away from tissues and kept near the heart and the lungs and the brain, which are the most important parts. And this allows the whale to dive for a much longer time than it would have if it couldn't do this special adaptation.